Hello, hello. I want to rant about I didn't know I could be hurt. And this was something in my life I shared in other episodes that I never really emotionally felt a lot of things in my life. At least it didn't feel like the way other people were describing things. So like it always felt like I don't know, in some sense my emotions like I said, I was living more in my head than with my heart, I guess. So it just didn't feel like life triggered um, strong emotions. Um, and that's not like I didn't experience emotions at all. Of course, I still I could be down. I was very melancholy, melancholy. I don't know where the I say melancholy, down, the blues. I don't know how you call it. Yeah, just kind of this feeling of loneliness that I had often, feeling alone, feeling by myself. So I think there's just like this connection why I didn't feel, especially in personal relationships, like interpersonal relationships, that I just didn't really feel a lot because I kind of sheltered myself off from the outside world in my mind. So I was very fearful as a kid, and so again, that's emotion too, right? But like, it's not you were afraid, but it's not like you how do you call it? Like you physically feel these emotions very strongly, like they're in your mind. Like the fear is mostly in your mind, and I wouldn't feel that strong of a physical reaction. I did have nightmares as a very young kid, which of course you would feel like intense fear in your body. But for a long time, for me, I just never really felt these heavy emotions until like the last 1 or 2 years. All of a sudden, because I want to talk about hurt, I mean like really hurt, like you feel like you've been ripped up on the inside. Because everybody, like I say, everybody feels some type of emotions, positive, negatives, but like there was a kind of like class or depth or severity, I don't know, of emotions, and specifically referring to emotional pain that I just had never experienced and could never really see myself experiencing. But then it did happen. So again, let me start from that beginning. Like, as a kid, I was very fearful, and I was a smart kid, like socially smart, but very kind of shy-ish. It's really weird. Like when I would feel safe, I would be very expressive, but otherwise I would be very shy, afraid to do new things, didn't like new things, strange things, like to be at my house, not at anybody else's house. Like the, I like to make my life predictable so I can remove the strange and the fear and the scary kind of. So I would use kind of like I guess my verbal strength and verbal prowess and your intelligence or your social intelligence, I guess, to make situations so they are in a way that I feel safe. So to manipulate the situation or a person to do something or not do something. So I would be very persuasive. I could be able to argue for things of why we should play this game and not that game, or why somebody should play with that toy, not that toy, so I could play with the one that I want. I had that stuff with my cousin all the time. Like we would line up the toys in the category of coolness, two by two, like mixed sets of two, and then we could take turns picking which one of the set we want, so that would be fair. But I could just always just kind of argue around that to make him pick the one that I didn't want to play with. I would be like, whoa, that's a cool arm. I hope you're not going to, oh, you picked it. Oh, too bad. Like from a very early age, I kind of did that very consciously. Um, I never, I never manipulate to get people to really do something like against their will. I would say I never was somebody like, I was never a bad boy. Like I was scared. Like I didn't do anything. Like I didn't. I don't know what you call it in English. Bella Chilella. It's like ringing a bell at random doors and then running away. You know, stuff like that. I never did stuff like that. I didn't like very physical typical boy games. I guess like you had these very tiny hard apples that would grow on these trees, kind of like apple. They look like apples. I don't know what they were. So they were very hard, and they would have like war with that. And I never liked that type of games. Anywhere where you could be hurt, I didn't like that. And as I grew older, it's funny. Like when I was younger, a lot of older kids actually drew towards me to play with me. But as I got older, I drew towards younger kids, like 1 or 2 years younger, because then you'd feel you're the oldest, right? So then again, you'd feel control. So in that situation, I think because I kind of created that in my life, because I had that fear, I wanted to create these safe situations. I didn't want to do things out of the ordinary. I was almost automatically constantly in my mind. And because, and I always describe it kind of like as the video game effect, that I felt like a lot of my life I was living in third person, in the sense that I'm looking at myself living my life. Because I'm looking at the situation all the time, or very often. It's not like 100%, but very often it would be like, okay, these are the people. I can see he's grumpy. Oh, I need to be careful that they don't get in a fight, or like you would just think about everything all the time, and then all the time, a lot, and thus you would kind of see it as almost like a board game or like a video game. Like, if I do this or say this, that will influence that person that way. So he will do this probably. And if I say this, then this will happen. So I was kind of playing with situations, and it worked in the sense of that I felt like I had a lot of control. I felt like I could make those situations the way I wanted them. And very often, like 95, 90, I don't know, like a lot of high percentage, I could create the situation I wanted. So that made me feel very powerful as well. So I guess that filled me with a sense of pride. And I think over the years, as that grew, what happens is you start looking down on people because you have the feeling that you're just moving everybody. And of course, this is an inflated perception and feeling. Like people are doing also what they would want. I would just suggest things that they also liked, and they didn't really care between A and B. I just wanted them to pick B. Like I said, I didn't really make people do things that they really didn't want, right? Like to make them do, I don't know, bad things. Or it was always, in a sense, in a positive light in the context of a game, or like, but it was more like, are we going to play this game A or game B? Or, and also in positive ways, like I said, if I saw somebody was kind of out of it or grumpy, we would play like these LARP, like these live action games where I had like a game, I was like the boss character always, and then they all had characters and they could level up, and it was kind of like a video game, real life. I'm so sad I don't have any footage of that, because it would be super funny to see these kids doing like grab attacks and like almost like fighting games and stuff. So it was like very structured play. We had leveling up and then beating an ex-boss and an ex-boss, and famous characters from comics and movies and stuff. Anyway, so I could kind of also, you could say, steer, manipulate always sounds so negative, but like influence people in a positive light. If I would see somebody's out of the group, then I can make it so I focus on him, give him a new attack or something like that, and then he would, look, I got a new attack, like, or I'm the one that beat the boss with the final move, something like that, So it wasn't just like I just did it. I could just do that. This is just kind of like my skill, and the way I lived life. So, and I was training myself to live life like that. But over the years, what it do, of course, almost, if you look at people as objects to position from like that third person perspective, like this world, almost like it's a game board. Like there are pieces that you can shift around, and you have a feeling that you are doing that, even though it might be an illusion for a large part. I don't know. I was just very dominant in an interesting way because I wasn't physical, I wasn't violent, I wasn't angry. I was angry inside, but I never expressed anger. Not really. Maybe about my brother and my little brother, I had that, but so it was a kind of like a weird, interesting combination of somebody who's very dominant because he's very dominant socially, I guess, because I could just dominate. I was older than most of the kids. I could dominate the group by suggesting ideas, arguing for why this would be good or would be bad, and nobody could really go against it in that sense. So in that sense, that's how I was dominant, not in the kind of like bully way. So for a lot of kids, I think the experience was just positive, just a lot of fun. But for me, over time, especially as you grew to be a teenager, you kind of, yeah, like you said, you grow more distant towards people because you've been treating them kind of like objects in some sense. Of course, you're still enjoying playing with them, but in some sense, you also treat them like objects to be manipulated. And if you have the feeling that you are also succeeding in that, it makes you look down on people because it feels like they have no true agency or nothing to really offer. They're just extensions of me in some sense. And I think that kind of pride and that illusion just made me not connect at all to people, like not in a deeper level. Like again, I was socially strong, so I could just connect. I could connect with anybody. Doesn't matter if it was the geek or the jock or the cool guy or it didn't really matter. I could shift. I could know how to approach them and in that sense have friends at every level in high school. You know, like all groups. Never really seeing myself. I would see the groups like it's like you see the structure. I would just look at life like that, like in a meta way all the time. So you would kind of see like, oh, you guys are in the cool group because you think that's cool, and this guy's hanging. You could see the hierarchy. Like you just see through it very quickly because you like to analyze things. So you look for patterns and structure and stuff. Maybe also where it isn't, but anyway, I developed this. I think because I developed this distance to people, it makes you not really connect, and doesn't make you really feel emotionally connected, right? So of course, I could experience things like joy, being excited about something. Again, anger was like I really had a lot of pent up anger, like more inside. I expressed more like in my art, my drawings and stuff, because I didn't really dare. It's kind of like a situation with my mom. Express it towards my mom, or like I just avoided conflict like the plague, and that's still in some sense a pattern of my life. It's just deep fear of strength and anger. In myself and in others. But anyway, so those were kind of the emotions I felt. So again, I had that, and that anger felt like, in that sense, kind of deep, like, whoa, where's this coming from? And when I came to faith, I really tried to rectify the relationship with my brother and really feel like, oh, this feels like it's outside of me. It really felt like one time I was angry, and it felt like all of a sudden like this, almost like like something just jumping on your back or something, and it just feel like it just strengthened the anger, and I was like, whoa, what is this? I want to stop this. But again, focusing about the hurt, I had this barrier between myself and my emotions, I think, because I didn't really treat everybody like equals, you could say. And I didn't really open myself up because that was losing control. But because people kind of became objects, I just wasn't interested in anybody. Like not really, like not in a deep sense. Like to really, I was interested in the sense like we can have fun together and we can play, and in that sense you're friends. You share your life in that sense, but not in a deeper way, like you share what's on your heart. Or I would just be very self-centered because you're in your mind all the time thinking about how you can make it a safe place for yourself. So you're just worrying about you, like, and the environment, and the people are the environment, right? And so it's just myself, and like later on, like a friend of mine really told me, like, yeah, you were just such a selfish dick. Like I always wanted to play with you, but you never did something that you didn't want to do. Like you always Wesley only does what Wesley wants to do. And my little brother actually said, like, once we were picking out a movie with a group of friends, and mostly his friends, I think. So again, younger kids. My brother's 5.5 years younger. So his friends would ask Wesley, so they were kind of arguing about what video to watch it, like back in the video or DVD times. And then my brother would be like, no, don't ask Wesley. Because if Wesley wants something, he can make it that somebody else wants that too. He was very young, so it's kind of like, and I was a teenager, I don't know, maybe like 14 or something, so he was like 9, I don't know. So that was like, that is interesting, like to like hear it out loud, because that was true, like that was kind of what was happening all the time, and he perceived that hey, I want to do something, but then, and we were about to do something. Then Wesley comes in, and all of a sudden everybody wants something else because they're persuaded that this is stupid and this is cool or something. So yeah, I just having that. I when I came to faith, especially after a couple of years, I really felt like, hey, I'm not loving people, and I don't know how to say that. Like, it's not like, again, I wasn't like a bad guy. Like everybody would have said I was loving, probably, because I was open, I was friendly, I was kind. And again, I was self-centered, so I would like, and I could have like, I could use humor to sometimes sting, because I didn't use any physical violence or like verbally attack somebody. So humor would be a way that you could kind of sting or humiliate people. So I guess maybe in my competitive drive, I was, I think, an arrogant in the sense of that you would, yeah, kind of inspired by Michael Jordan, right? Good and the bad. So very driven to win, but also humiliating your opponent and degrading them a bit. Like it wasn't good. But that, again, so all these things made sure that I was very far away from people. Like, again, the perception was probably that I was close to a lot of people because I'm just socially strong. But in my mind, I would be, okay, I'm going to say this thing, then I'm going to respond like that. Yes, they do. Ding. So like that feeds kind of like that ego. Then I'm going to say this and this and this. And I'm going to talk about. Then I'm going to steer this conversation here. Then I'm going to say that and that. And then I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to get a drink. And I'm going to move away from this conversation. And then they're happy because we've catched up. We caught up. Did some catching up. And again, that wasn't like, not like that was 100%. And some friendships you were still closer than the other. But there was still this kind of wall where you felt I wasn't really connecting to people. And again, the only other emotions were kind of like except for excitement, that stuff that you liked, was more gloomy loneliness that I carried with me. But again, it was more like, okay, like a heavy cloud around you, but I could deal with that, right? Like felt alone, but I kind of had this lie in my heart, but I have to be alone. Like I'm made to be alone. Because that's the way I treated life anyway. Like, I didn't trust anybody to collaborate or something, like, because I looked down upon everybody's skills. Like, I felt like I was superior in anything and everything. Always felt that if I wanted to learn something, I could very fast. But, of course, you only stick to the things that you can do really well. And I could learn a lot of stuff relatively fast. So I could do a lot of things, like, relatively well. But I never really pursued anything to perfect it, because then you might find out you're not as good as you thought you were, right? So there's also this kind of illusion that you, through behavior patterns, not trying a lot of new stuff, like you kind of maintain it, this bubble, this illusion. Anyway, I started to open up myself more because I wanted to love. I first had to let God in. God really said something like, you can't love others if you not let me love you more. Like you can't show others what you haven't experience. So that started a healing process where I just threw myself out there more. I would just start sharing my personal stuff, maybe a bit too quick sometimes. I just didn't have any feeling for that. And what I found really, really difficult was just listening to people, because I just didn't care. Like it was so difficult. Like just to sit there and in your mind, you would just feel like, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. And with your will, you would be saying, like, I do want to care. Like I do want to learn. I want to see people. So I had that desire, and I just threw myself in there, sharing more, and sometimes it was too much, too fast, but being vulnerable, let other people be vulnerable. Then unfortunately, vulnerability kind of became like a skill, like a thing that I knew I could use to shift a social situation. So if I'm going to be vulnerable, then they're going to be vulnerable. Then we've opened up the situation. Then we completely changed the atmosphere in a room, right? Like, and I think I shared that before. Now I'm at a point where I just don't really, like, I know my intentions have changed and I'm different, but it's because I can still see that. Like, I can see a lot of patterns. Because I analyze, it's just like I immediately see that. I immediately see that when I say something, that it does more than what I say, and I see that with other people too. But I also, it's like immediately that happens even before I say it, and then I have this dilemma, like, oh, am I going to do it now because I know that this is the effect that it's probably going to have, or if I'm going to say it because I really want to say this, right? And that kind of had this shame and this guilt, I guess, from my past, because I did use it more purposely like a tool or a weapon, that it sometimes just drives me kind of crazy. Of how can I possibly just be, because I just analyze everything, and then it feels like it's beating the life out of everything. It's kind of like what they say, like if you love something, like movies or books or, I don't know, wine or like anything, and you really give yourself to that, all of a sudden it will ruin all the average experiences, because it's like you can, like with stories, like you can see the story pattern. So if it's like a cheesy story, you're like, from the minute 5, you're like, okay, I know how this movie's gonna go. I know how it's gonna end. I know every scene. Like, it's not. So it's actually breaking the bubble of the magical bubble of story, right? Like, you're not in the story. You don't believe it anymore as a story. You see it as a created product, and not as a story. You have the same with music or like. So everybody that would be that start to become an expert at something and recognize how that thing is built, that would often rob them of the joy of experiencing that thing, until maybe they go through that, or maybe only the really good things they can experience. Like with wine, you probably can't appreciate cheap wine in the same way, or just bad wine, if you've developed your palate, right? Yeah, I don't know. How did I get here? I kind of lost. So the pattern recognition. So that's kind of what ruined a lot of social interaction for me, because I would just see that. Oh, people do this because they're insecure, then they do this to make a joke. But like, you would see, kind of like if you would write a script or write a story, that this line is not just saying that the character, because he experiences that, he's also trying to do this. Like, and if you just see that all the time and see it for yourself, it's like, again, like you don't know how to act in that. Anyway, that's a slightly different subject, but it did contribute to that emotional barrier that I would feel of being in my mind and not in my heart, I guess. But I did develop and I did grow. So I did feel more, and I did feel like I cared more about people, that I wanted to know how they were doing. So as I set my heart on those things slowly start to shift, even though it didn't feel like it came natural to me. Which is weird, because I had the social skills, but I didn't have like the interest. So I tried to get the heart there behind the skill, and that made me able to really encourage people and help people and pray with them and help them in situations and learn the power of listening. I guess I've really learned that for myself with my wife, because she's really good at that, and where I always kind of undervalued that, then I'm like, oh wow, no, this is actually super powerful. Somebody just sitting there and just listening to you, which is really weird, because I'm just still different than ranting, even though ranting is good as well, just talking out loud. But anyway, that would change, so I would start to feel more stuff, and then all of a sudden I would start to feel more kind of that fear of conflict and of disruption of the social atmosphere would become a lot stronger. So where before I was kind of fearful, just more like for myself, just in a sense of I don't want any conflict, I don't want them to have I don't want to be in a conflict situation, but I didn't really feel that strong. It was also after I had a burnout, so it felt like I had a burnout, and that just felt like it just completely wrecked my system, like my nerves. I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it, like your nerves or the way your body just processes information and emotion. Like, it would be like it's going to fight and flight like that, and I couldn't turn it off. Like, it's just like, you don't have to go fight and flight because of this situation, but then your body would just do. So especially fear and anxiety would all of a sudden, I would feel more physically. So that was already kind of like a shift, like, oh, whoa, why is my body doing this? Like, I never felt things so intensely in my body physically. And again, this is why I could never empathize with people that had that. But again, I had this. It would still, so that was some step, I wouldn't say in the right direction, but like it was some shift in the way I would experience emotion. But still, fear, for some reason, that doesn't feel like hurt. It's kind of like being on edge or feeling like this tingling sensations in your body and or this pressure on your chest, having difficulty to breathe. Still on, yeah. Which was also very frustrating. And that was because I started to care more about people. Like I didn't care. I didn't give a shit about people, so you wouldn't really care as much about people rejecting you. Still, on a deeper level, of course, you still would. But because you've already categorized somebody as, well, you're beneath me anyway, and you're stupid, and I'm controlling what you're doing, yeah. It's like an ant trying to reject me, yeah. Good luck. Like I don't care, right? There's nothing to reject here. There's no real deeper relationship. So as you start opening up to people, I think that the idea of people expressing anger, and I had people in my life that just went through a lot of traumatic things, so they had a lot of these little toxic behaviors, or just unhinged anger, or just these little bitey ways that they would have, these masks or these things that they would use to self-protect that would be hurtful. But again, they didn't really feel that hurtful yet. It was just that I kind of had this anxiety and fear about disruption of social fabric in a group, in the context of a group, or I don't know if I've ever really deeply, consciously feared that they're going to reject me. I don't think I had that. But I did have like a fear of, I think in a deeper level maybe, but not in a conscious way, like, oh no, they're going to abandon me or something. Because I always felt like I'm alone anyway. I'm carrying this by myself. So I guess when that started to shift, and what kind of set up the deeper hurt, I guess, was finding people where you felt like, hey, we're going in the same direction. We're going that way. And for the first time kind of felt like maybe I'm not alone in this. Yeah. And this was specifically more about growing in the Christian faith and pursuing God, and I was frustrated that in the Christian church it felt like it was so hard to find somebody that wanted to talk about God. Like, I want to talk about Jesus. It's like, service is over. Now we just talk about regular life, get a coffee, and don't bring up the sermon, or don't, like, you would just see, like, again, I analyze stuff, you would just see that people felt uncomfortable talking about Jesus. Not like, didn't really, like, there was no real experience there to reference that like they experience daily life. And as I was growing, I felt like I was experiencing God more and more in the prophetic, or like with prayer and intercession. I saw powerful things of deliverance, setting people free from spirits, myself being set free from spirits. Like, it just came to life in front of me. I felt like the Spirit more changing me on the inside, like I said, with those emotions, caring more about other people, feeling more love. So I really feel like, wow, this is really real. And I'm really, like, I feel the power. I see it in myself. I feel different. My intentions are different. I feel like there's this whole different drive in me. So I was very excited about that, and I wanted to share that, but I just felt like I just had to wring everybody's arm to go pray, which was very disappointing to me. And then I found a bunch of people that God placed in my life that also felt like that also had that, it also kind of had their friction with their churches, and also felt like there's got to be more than this, right? Like, and they just wanted to see God, wanted to pray together, wanted to just know more about God and live it out. So that made me feel like I wasn't alone for the first time in a long time. I think I had this wound where a lot of my early, like, best childhood friends, they moved away, or I lost that relationship and somehow, like, in the first 5 to 6 years of my life, I think. Like, I had a childhood friend, and then he moved away to a different city. Then I had another friend, and then he skipped the class, and so I kind of lost that friendship as well. And yeah, I think there was just this deep wound in combination with that whole mental part that kind of separated me from people, made me feel very alone. So when I found these people, and I was like, oh wow, it just kind of gave me a bit of hope, I guess, there. But that also kind of set me up for the failure, because it made me put my weight of hope on them, I think. So that was great for a long season. A lot of people experience it. So because we really shared life in a very close way together. I never shared myself like that, opened up. It was just very special. I never experienced anything like that and haven't since. It wasn't that long ago, but just we would share our sins, like we wouldn't be afraid to share our weaknesses. We would pray and stand together to help break patterns in our life, destructive patterns in our lives. And it was just, God would just do amazing things, like in that pursuit of house church. So we pursued that in the context of a house church. It just felt so much more organic than the institutional kind of church that I grew up in. I'm a Protestant coming from a kind of like weird mix between Reformed and Pentecostal, I would say, is the best way to describe it. Then went more to the charismatic side, then was in contact with kind of like some Hillsong kind of like churches. So I kind of like saw a lot of the different things, but they all, in some sense, they're different, but in some sense, they're all the same in their structure, in the way they perceive church and the purpose of a church service and how you should structure it. So house church was very different because it was focused on, like Paul said, like when you come together and everybody has something, right? So that really drew me to it, and when it was at its highs, when everybody was sharing, that was so powerful. Everybody was sharing through their gifts, and the Spirit would just focus on something, and then we would focus on teaching, then we would focus on worship, then it would just be focusing on one person, and everybody with their gifting would kind of chime in, and God would really restore things. It was just really special. So I felt a lot of healing there, and then a lot of other people as well. But then, of course, a lot of friction. With house church also comes a lot of friction because you're way closer together. Like, you can't just smile and wave, kind of like you can do in a bigger church. Like I shared before, like if something's wrong with you, everybody will know. Like, you can't hide if you're depressed, if you're down, if you're discouraged. There's no hiding, and that is so, like, we're so used to hiding. That's such a sad thing about human beings. In the way our society is shaped, even church is shaped, or schools, or all our institutions, basically. We're just, and even in our close relationships, unfortunately, a lot of people, like, they don't even feel a room to open up. So we are very adept at masks and at hiding our emotions instead of expressing our emotions. And like if there's shit in your house, you clean it up, right? Like, immediately. But you as humans, we have kind of learned to, like, oh, if you just close your nose, you can just walk around it. You can just, and then until it gets too bad, people snap. But that was kind of what we saw in house church. Like, that people didn't feel good, and everybody saw and was like, hey, how you doing? It was like, oh my goodness, people are in my face. Like, it would be so vulnerable. We wouldn't be used to be vulnerable, and we would train being vulnerable, basically, because after a while it became normal, or a lot more normal. Like, for me, I feel no pressure at all anymore at sharing very intimate things, very, very painful or shameful or things. But again, that happened, but that also creates friction, right? Like, so you bump heads, and people can get angry, people can feel like hurt in the context, or people will go through hurtful things in their lives, and then you would feel that in the group because they would bring that. And so we did grow unbalanced. I think that after a while, if you have the focus on God and people, right? Like, and then the outside world, I would say that we started off focusing a lot on God, and the rest flowed from there. And then I think we focused too much on the personal, and there's always room for personal growth because it just feels like I'm such a mess. Like, really, if you just put yourself under a magnifying glass, there's always something to find. So I feel like we were too much in that, and that kind of made it feel real heavy all the time. And worship can really, when you focus on God, you just kind of forget these problems, and then He can point it out when it's time. Anyway, so that was, I think, difficult, and which made the atmosphere very heavy and made people hesitant, like made it feel heavy to come, and then like the joy was kind of seeped out of it a little bit. And it was still good in that sense, you were still dealing with yourself, but I think it was just the emotions were just too down in that sense. Anyway, we had people go through difficult stuff there, losing family members, and again, I would then experience people that had way traumatic past than I did. Like, I mean, everybody growing up, you always experience something that is that leaves wounds, I would say, like in your so that has traumatic in that sense, that a wound that influences patterns for the rest of your life. So in that sense, it's traumatic. But some people really go through like real messed up traumatic things, right? Like, because often you can have wounds from people having the best intentions and not really being destructive or toxic, but just you perceived it in this way because you believed this, kind of like that. But then other people just have like, they just encounter behavior that's just wrong and toxic on all levels, like either physical abuse, mental, emotional abuse, unsafe environments. I don't know, like all kinds of things, right? Like stuff that I hadn't, praise the Lord, didn't go through. And what always struck me was that people could feel when Lord would slowly bring stuff of that up from the past, like there's just a kind of like the pain that would come out, like the visceral pain that you could see that they would experience, or like when people lost family members, like the pain that they, like you could see that they like physically feel. I could just never understand that, and because I couldn't understand it because I was so, like I said, different. I was completely on the other side, from the heart all the way to the mind, getting slowly to feeling more. But to me, that was just still like so beyond me that I could just not, like the title of this video, I could never imagine that I could feel like that I could hurt that, that I feel it physically. So I always, that made it hard, like, because you want to empathize, but you can't really. You could see it, are really in pain, but there's always almost like this alarm in you because it's so foreign to you that it's like, is this right? Or in the sense of what's right? Right in the sense of, is this healthy? Like, is this normal? Is this part of the normal human experience? Is there something really like, you could see there's something broken, but so I always experiences like that, like, and I guess of course the pain shows something is broken, right? That's the purpose of the pain. But it just felt off to me and strange, and like I felt like, oh, is there even like a spiritual layer to this, right? Like, is there like, and of course the enemy does emphasize usually and try to anchor negative emotions, of course, and try to spiral them out of control. But yeah, it was just foreign to me. It was just strange, and I couldn't really, it was hard to empathize on a deeper level, because of course I could empathize in the sense of like they're in pain, but it just made it feel like I said, like, is there something that's not right about this, or I don't know. It's like I didn't know how to completely deal with it. It was just kind of overwhelming. And then it happened to me. And it didn't happen like suddenly. It happened slowly. There were just numerous like little conflicts, or little or bigger conflicts, lengthier conflicts that just kept going over long periods of time. And again, that kind of anxiety of like, oh no, there's social disruption, and I need to make sure, and again, that control kind of coming back in the sense of I need to make sure that everybody feels okay, and me taking responsibility for how the entire group feels. It's not a good recipe for success. So I would take that responsibility on me, and then of course feel the frustration if people weren't be able to set right. Like, you can't play these, then the illusion falls apart. Like, oh, you can't do that. You can't influence a situation like that you can just make everybody feel nice and now everybody's friends again. They have their own wills that, like, they if they don't want to make up, they can't make up. If they're stubborn, prideful, if they don't want to share, like, you can't make people do these things. And that, I guess, like, just so my pride also became hurt. So I think God also exposed that, even though I tried to leave it behind, that my identity was still really rooted in that strength or perceived ability that just was crumbling before my face. So in all these situations, I became hurt slowly, in a sense of seeing my friends tear each other apart in some sense, and them hurting me hurting them, and everybody says, and I believe wants to do the good thing, but we all keep hurting each other. It was just so painful to see. Also, as like we're again meta level, which I can't avoid, so painful to see that it felt like it was so easy, like the devil was just using the weaknesses in everybody to just kind of attack and neutralize everybody. So this weakness would speak to that weakness, and that weakness would speak to that weakness, and would just amplify the conflict. Anyway, that was just really hurtful and very painful decisions of people having asked people to not come to the group, because they felt like they just wouldn't stop attacking other people, but they were convinced that they were hearing from God, and like it was all this was this huge mess. And it's really painful because they were really close friends. Again, it was easier if it's some stranger that's there for 2 times and then he says something weird. You're like, sorry, buddy, we're not having this, right? It's different if you went through things and you shared things, like you fought through, you prayed for each other, you shared each other's weaknesses, pulled each other up. Like that made it really, really painful. But it really felt like we had to protect the safety, the integrity of the group. If people were not willing to yield to the entire group, if the entire group is saying like, no, what you're saying is not right, like everybody's saying it, no, but I'm hearing from God, like you could be wrong, right? Like if everybody here and you're not here all the time, like it was just frustrating. I probably have a video about that, maybe about, because it's about prophecy, like I want to talk about that as well. But anyway, that was just kind of building this hurt, like this is just so painful that Satan is kind of playing us out against each other, and having that feeling the duty and the responsibility. And also I felt the conviction, like I felt that was the right thing to do, even though it didn't feel fun to do, that they couldn't come to the group. And that just I guess that was just also like a brewing wound that was just kind of there. And again, this is anxiety with the conflict that I just couldn't. Again, the second burnout was kind of coming on again, slowly dropping out at work, for like working for 50%. So it was like slowly that was happening. And then there were some more of these like little, smaller conflicts of people just keep doing this destructive, self-destructive and group destructive behavior that we would constantly have grace for. Then it would have a period away to kind of reset yourself, go fast and come back. But then you would just see it happening again. It was about like somebody liking somebody and the other person didn't like him back, and just the way they handled that just made me so angry, because it felt like both of them were feeding the situation, though they both knew what the situation was, because it was going on for years. Like that was just so frustrating. Again, wounds of each other amplifying each other, right? Like, so a sister in need of a brother wanting the love of a sister, and then they just couldn't stay away from each other. One wants to be romantic, the other doesn't, but it does want the male attention of like a brother. Yeah, it's just I was just very upset because I just saw it happening all the time, and it was just like, get a hold of yourself. Like, and then also people just started making decisions where it felt to me in the beginning like we were doing this, and then all of a sudden it felt like this. And again, I'm not talking about whether I was right or they were right. Like, I don't want to talk about that. Like, that's how I felt. That's how it experienced to me. And again, that kind of loneliness thing came up again, in the sense of like, oh, but I thought we were all going in this direction, but now it feels like the decisions you're making. Did I never see this? Did I always cover my eyes? Did I make you something that you weren't? That I wanted to see, right? Like I didn't know, and because probably that person was just there. Like what it probably was is that I just never saw where that person truly was in their walk, in some sense. Maybe wanted to picture something different because I was so craving that. I don't know. But what I did know is that it hurt me so much. Because it went like, again, slow, frustration just kind of building, anger building. I didn't have any, like I said, I felt like, I didn't say that here, but like I felt after I had that pent up anger, I felt like I was delivered from that. And then it felt like I didn't experience anger anymore at all. But now it appeared that what I did was, in some sense, taking all these paper cuts from people and just felt like I can take it. Like I see why they're doing, again, the patterns. I see why they're doing that. So I wouldn't even allow myself to feel frustration. Not even consciously, like I just wouldn't feel anger in a situation, even though it was something that is kind of sliding you or just hurting you in some small sense, but I just didn't feel that physically. I could just see it in my mind. So I would be like, oh, but I can see that they do this because of their past, blah, blah, blah. I could just always see the patterns. That's why I couldn't be in the moment and just feel what I feel. Didn't even know that I was angry. Like I didn't even feel that. Sometimes like a week or a week and a half, like 2 weeks later, I would just feel this weird blob and I couldn't even discern whether it was fear or anger or anxiety. It was later on that I kind of felt like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not afraid, I'm angry. And I was like, well, I'm angry? Why am I angry? Like, and then of course, like one stat, it felt like after like one of these situations, I think he approached, that guy approached that girl again to say like that he, Allah, marry me, no, I don't know, you know, like, and then I was like, oh, no shit, like, and I was just like, to me it was like, no shit, Sherlock, like for the both of them, like, of course this was going to happen again, like, you could see that, right, like, but I was just so angry because I felt betrayed. So again, it comes to yourself, right, like you felt like, I felt like I could trust you, and you guys, and but there's also this slight, I guess, that you feel like you're not trusting my guidance or my leadership or because I was the elder of that group, how I warned you about that, advised you to do this, you did this, advised you to do this again, you did this, like, and then it blows up like I said it would, like, so then that, I guess that control guy gets to, then it kind of felt like I knew this was going to happen. I warned you this was going to happen. You did it anyway. Now it feels like I get to deal with the mess. So I guess I felt like that. And it felt like you're moving away from this purpose. Like, so when that happened, it felt like just something just broke inside. And that was, I think, the beginning where just all of a sudden, like, I think then all of a sudden I noticed, oh, I am angry. And I'm really angry. Like, I had this dream somewhere before that, like in the meantime, like where I think I shared that. When in the dream, I was just super vicious and super violent. And I'm like not violent at all. I haven't been in a fight in my entire life. Maybe like 1-2 second push fight, you know, as a kid. But even that was like scary. Like I'm not like shouting and cursing at people. I'm just always controlled that. Afraid of what would happen if I would let anger have a space and have two people angry. You don't know what's going to happen. So there might be a good side to that, but I guess it was in such an extreme that in that dream, I just completely snapped. I just became super violent, like beating the shit out of people until they're almost dead. And like, it was such a I woke up with such a horrific feeling, like, oh man, I feel awful. Like, that was very visceral. Like, what a horrible dream. Like, I couldn't stop myself, and I was just like, and I was maybe like your soul, or I don't know, even God maybe communicating to you, like, there's a lot of stuff, and if you're not dealing with this, it's going to go bad. And I just, all right, this analyzing, it's only like, stop analyzing. It's almost like it's somebody like, oh, how's that going to be perceived? How's that going to be twisted? How's that going to be? Just trying to control everything, but I can't, so I won't. But anyway, once kind of like that thing snapped, and I just had, sorry for my word, fuck it. Like, that's the only word I can use. Fuck it. I just felt like I, in some sense, let go of that thing. And it was like, it wasn't a season where we kind of felt like it was also time to move on, that a new season was around the corner. And that's actually when we were soon after, we felt like we already knew that we were going to leave the country, and then soon after Ecuador came around, where I'm right now. So I guess it all felt like, in some sense, in all these little things, that everything was coming to like an end, but not in the way I had hoped. Because I already, from very early on, we already had kind of like these visions, and felt like God was saying, there's going to be an end to this season. You're not going to be together all the time. There's going to be a time when I'm going to send you out, and what you've learned here together, I'm going to spread. But I, of course, felt and hoped that it would be at the end, yay, everybody, high fives, there we go, you know. But it felt at the end, it was just kind of like crumpling, and just a lot of little conflicts, and just, for myself, it really felt like, bam, something just erupted and just snapped. It broke in, I guess, my trust or my commitment to it. It just felt like, okay, fuck it. Like, again, I felt betrayed or alone again, I guess, in some sense. Like I'm dragging this cart and everybody's just kind of sitting on it, or even dragging in a different direction. But I felt in the beginning we were all dragging this cart. And I felt like that a lot of times in my life. Like I felt like that what I really cared about, nobody else really cared about. So the moment I would let go, it would just collapse to the ground. And in a desire to really start something and start something that could just run on its own, it would just be you pulling it. And I guess that's in a lot of situations that's true in the world, where people that lead something carry that burden. That's also the burden of leadership in some sense, but I guess because it felt for a while like we had that shared burden of leadership, even though after a while me and my wife made the elders of the group having like a kind of like a final responsibility, we still always felt like that we have mature Christians around us and everybody is carrying a weight here, right? Like even if you don't have the position or role of an elder, you can still be an elder in the sense of being a mature Christian in that role. And yeah, so I think that sense of feeling abandoned again and betrayed. So again, it was like a toxic chemical of all these things coming together. So your ego, seeing people are not taking my advice, and I was wrong. I was right about those things, but at the same time, it feels like I failed as a leader because it feels like everything's crumbling. So again, then you have your identity in the leadership and not just being, and that means that you're exercising more control over people, which people would feel. They wouldn't feel completely free. Again, I wasn't like this, but it was still there in subtle ways, and that made me feel responsible for their mistakes or their faults, so that reflects back on me. So again, then you're back to selfishness again and not looking at their, like if love doesn't seek itself, it says in the Bible, like then perfect love would not look at how the situation affects you at all. It would just could be completely here, like a parent can do with a child, right? Like if they drop the milk and they fall, you'd be like, oh, come here, right? Like sure, you had to clean it up, but like you'd be like, oh, how are you, how are you? So I guess that revealed to me that my identity was way too much built up in the pastoring role. I felt like I smothered, I talked about in other videos about that, like I felt like I have this analytical side, this teaching side, and this people side, and it felt like this side was smothered, like I was only the people keeping the peace, and like the maybe sometimes more confrontational, combatant, direct, truth kind of place. The teaching side felt like it was kind of like being suppressed. So I also felt that frustration about wanting to speak out about things, but not knowing when and where, and I know that's going to hurt them, and then what's the good timing, and overthinking those things, I think, and I maybe sometimes even not saying things or waiting too long to say certain things, which made you feel guilty in the end, like, oh, if I would have said that before, would that have been different? Like, so again, that controls thing was on overdrive. That's when I felt like the last couple months when we were in the Netherlands, God really told me, like, you got to get rid of this spiritual stronghold in your heart. Like, so I did like prayers that heal the heart, which I can really advise people to do. Look it up, from Mark Verkler. Has like a course about how to break spiritual strongholds in your life, basically. Very thoroughly, very intense, but it works. So I did that, but yeah, again, didn't know I could be hurt like that. That just, again, that already felt like something I don't think I had experienced before. I always kind of described it like somebody would take like I don't know, like what's it called, like a cheese grater, and it just like ripping across your heart. It really felt like physically something was hurt, almost like there's a real wound there, like a physical wound there. And that just kind of also shocked me, because I just, like I said, I never experienced that before, and I was kind of afraid what I was gonna do. So I was just like, I just didn't know. Like I always had, Satan has always attacked me with like, because I guess of the control and manipulating, like, you are actually evil, and you are only destroying people. While my heart was always to encourage people and build people up. So of course, he gives you the opposite to keep you from your purpose in your calling, right? But that, again, of course, that always has limited me in being able to express, like I would say, healthy anger, healthy boundaries and frustration, like, hey, I don't like this, and I would just kind of just take it, feel like, well, I'm strong enough, or I understand this, I can manage it with my mind, so this won't hurt me. But again, now it felt like I was paying for all those times over the years, because I felt like all these things came back, even from years, like decades, like when I was a kid, all these situations where I did that, where I didn't dare express my frustration or didn't dare push back when people did something to me, and what felt really scary is, like, again, for me, it was just complete surprise, like, oh, I'm angry. Oh, and I'm really, really angry, more angry than I've ever felt before, and it just felt like this box of fire that just, or bats or something, I don't know, just like it felt like, whoa, now it's just, my entire system felt like it's just buzzing through my body, and you become more frustrated more quickly, and again, another burnout. So they go hand in hand, probably, like, what's the real cause, right? And that just made me feel like, man, I'm afraid to talk to people at all, because I feel like I'm going to just rip into them, and they're going to get in a whole layer of anger that has nothing to do with the situation, even though it might be partly because of that situation, because it felt like I said, like the death by the paper cut, 1,000 paper cuts, like it felt like it was all these things over time that all of a sudden came together in like one big firestorm, and hitting on maybe one deep wound of feeling disrespected or never feeling, I don't know exactly still what it is, something with that, something with not feeling honored or respected or valued, I think. And senses of, I guess, unfairness. I always, like I said, I had in another episode, like this feeling of when something is not true, that I could be really angry. I'm the debater personality type, so they really care about arguments and whether people have a structured argument about what they believe or what they care about. And when people wouldn't have that, I just couldn't handle that. Like, I can't handle people saying stupid stuff or unsupported stuff, right? Like, you see, people can say something you don't agree with or don't believe, but you can see if they have an argument, like, okay, I can see why you believe that argument, even though I think there's faults in it. But you would respect that because they had an argument that you can at least accept. But this pain, man, it was just like, so anger, and it would just feel like it kept building and building and building and building, and just, again, with that burnout, would just amplify it, because then your whole defense systems are also off. You're just like at the bottom, no energy, which makes you more cranky and anxious and irritable as well. And I was just, so yeah, then eventually we left for Ecuador, and I kind of, like, that physical move felt like a spiritual move, in a sense of needing the distance from things to just, what just happened, kind of just recalibrate. And again, like I said, I never thought I could be hurt by that. So it was, for the first time also as well, like, oh wow, that's how this person must have felt in that situation. And I couldn't really have the deep grace and compassion for that, because I couldn't understand. And then I was like, wow, you can really be just, like they would say, torn apart. Because it really felt like that, torn apart, like you're so, ripped, like it's like there's physical wounds on the inside, like there's really claws that have been on the inside. And it just kind of baffled me, I guess. And I feel like I'm slowly growing out of it again, luckily, but still fairly regularly, once every couple of weeks, or like, it kind of goes with ups and downs. So like a couple of days goes really good, and then you have a couple of downs where again you feel like, feel some anger coming again, or fear, or something visceral, like physical. Like I said, it was connected to, it felt connected to the burnouts as well, in the sense that they just disrupted my nerve center or something, like the way your body just responds to things, and like the way I felt emotions, just especially negative emotions, just felt more physical. Yeah, so welcome to the rest of humanity, I guess, for me. Because I had the same, like, in songs and all these stuff, so people are like talking about heartbreak. Like, I couldn't even imagine, like, I love my family. Like, I couldn't even imagine, like, that if somebody died feeling torn apart like that. I feel really hurt and I feel really sad, but I felt like I could always frame it in a way of remembering what you had, being grateful. I always try to be like grateful. Like, you never know when you lose people. Try to live very consciously, especially when your loved ones. Like, this might be the last time. And it feels weird, but doing that with younger people. Like, my parents are like in the 60s now, so not old, but not that old. But it's still, I don't know, maybe become aware after that. A friend of ours in the fellowship lost family members. You're like, oh, well, you never know. Like, it could be the end. Like, it could be like that, right? So I think that that's why I always had the perception. And again, because I just didn't have that, even when I started opening up more and felt like I loved more, I'd never felt it physically very strongly, right? Like, it's like a knowing, inner knowing, but not like a lot of other people sometimes describe to me how they feel about loved ones or missing somebody. And it's hard for me to also see, like, is this also just part of my personality type, right? Like, is it the way I experience the world, and is that okay? So praying about that to find a healthy balance, because I don't know what that healthy balance is. Like, it's wrong, like the Bible says, right? Like, those who compare themselves among themselves are not wise. Like, it's not smart to compare yourself to other people, because there's always going to be something that's going to make you feel bad or superior or whatever. And so I need him to show me who I am. And be at peace with that. So that means not just settling for where I am right now and not just believing, saying, oh, well, the psychology report says, but just letting him move me to where I need to be, right? But yeah, man, that pain. Yeah, that pain. And so, yeah. It makes you feel so vulnerable. It makes you realize how weak we are as human beings. Like, for all that. And that's a weird thing. So that's the power of the spirit, right, man? I mean, that's to me always with like atheistic people that I could never see how could they never believe in a world beyond just the physical world, because it feels like so much of the human experience is not about just the physical, just about eating, drinking, and surviving. It's about all these other things that are feel so random: fear, rejection, desire to be part of a group, like all these things. And then, yeah, they're just extensions of animal instincts. You've just destroyed the entire human experience as an illusion. And you can believe that, but what is it? Occam's razor? Like, what's the most likely explanation? That all this which makes the human experience unique and valuable, that's all just an illusion. Yeah, no, I can't see it. Anyway, that it just shows you how strongly something like your emotional and your mental state can impact everything. Because if you're joyful, I remember those seasons when I was like, high seasons with God, feeling joy like all the time. Just like kind of like the promise, like overflowing living water. Feeling just like you're bubbling like up all the time, feeling close to God all the time, whether you're singing on your bike or coming home and just wanting to pray, wanting to be with him, and just feeling immediately like you're there in the throne room. That just makes you. It's all like invisible. It's all spiritual. Like, it's like I'm not doing anything but talking to God, which according to atheists would just be talking in the air, and then feeling this power flow through you. I always feel sad for atheists in the sense of I can get it if you've never experienced it, that you feel like this all just seems like hocus pocus, right? But I really get it. But I'm also sad because it's like they're shutting off an experience of something they just haven't experienced. It's kind of like somebody's like, if you're in that roller coaster, you're going to feel like that. Well, I've never felt like that, so that roller coaster doesn't exist. Well, you could jump in. I never felt like that. It's all bullcrap. Yeah, I kind of felt like that. And of course, it's not as simple as getting on a roller coaster with God, but in some sense it is. Like, I know there's atheists that's genuinely seeking or asking God, are you out there? And because I have seasons like that as well as a Christian, that you're like seeking God and it feels like radio silence. But then all of a sudden it's just once you've really experienced that, you just can't unsee it anymore. Like, and I just wish that everybody had a chance to experience that, because that's the high. But again, now I felt the low. Like I said, it's not like I was kind of down and depressed, like lonely, melancholic. You know what I mean? But this, yeah, felt like you've been torn apart. And yeah, now slowly in the process of recovering from that. Not recovering that, getting it back. But yeah, giving that anger to God. I had this vision of when I was praying about the anger, like, Lord, I don't even know what to do with this. Like, I can rant to express stuff, but I feel like there's a deeper way. Scripture says, like, put off anger, put off malice and slander and all these negative things. Like, there's a way where you can give it to God and He can just transform it, instead of being like, you need to express everything. And again, I need to find a healthy balance of expressing healthy anger, not ungodly anger. Anger of man does not lead to the righteousness of God, but there is a righteous anger that Jesus was portraying, like a anger at injustice and hypocrisy and those type of things. But there's also still a place where these deeper anger that comes from these deep wounds, like, if you're actually angry about something else, it doesn't help to express this little anger about this, which takes the baggage of all this other place, right? Talked about that in that anger episode. And I really want that image I had of like these huge crystal structures with like some spirit or fire or something in it, and it felt like God said these crystal structures are the way that your mind is just constantly trying to hold on to these situations or understand them or relive them and change them in your mind. And what if I would have said that, or what if I would have said this, or what if I would say this, and something that I haven't done yet. And it's like that is creating this structure for this anger just living all the time. And in that image, He was just opening them up, and I was just so scared, and then it would just be like a flame, but then it would just be gone basically, and He would crash these things around me. It really gave me hope of God saying, like, I'm going to let this anger out of your system, but also destroy these systems that are housing this anger, and finding kind of like the deep wounds that are housing this primal, the beginning of this anger that you probably in your childhood somewhere built up, of feeling disrespected or not daring to do anything to protect yourself. I had that with my mom as well. I guess felt overrun by her anger or discipline. And yeah, so that was really hopeful. But it's also scary, because then you need to go to God, and there's something really scary about going to God. This is also to me, like, to the atheist, like, why is that so completely different? Yeah, they don't know because they don't experience it, but I can tell you there's a huge difference between you saying something out loud by yourself, saying something to somebody else, and then saying that in addressing God. And we would see that in fellowship. People would just share like they're all struggle and pain. And I'm like, okay, now say that same thing, but address it to Him. Address Him. Say how you're angry at Him, or how you want to lay it down, and all of a sudden people would just choke up. People would be like, they just said it, and they would be like, it's like they feel this trembling, like, and that's what God, like, I would have the same thing. Like, this is ranting. It's easy, like praying this out, and I try to, or journal it out, and you can receive things from God, but then all of a sudden you feel like exposed before your Maker. There's a reason why humanity instinctively draws to prayer, because He's there. If you also have that hurt, that deep hurt, and know that there's somebody that can heal it. I'm in that process now. And yeah, I need him. I see it, how he can just disclose things of your past and reveal these patterns. It's these visions he gives, and it's how he speaks sometimes just directly, and then you just break, you just cry, and then it just heals slowly. He is a father, a good father. You don't always understand him. Sometimes you're angry at him. You're like, I want you now, here. But he lets you struggle. Like he lets you, because he's interested in maturing us and not just taking pain away. We want him to just take pain away, but he's interested in making us more like Christ, making us better human beings. And if there's a big wound, like just like in the real world, right? Like if somebody has like a bullet that's still in the wound, they're not going to help you cover it up. Like they're going to help you. They're going to touch that, hey, ow, ow, ow. They're going to help. It's going to hurt a lot, but it's got to get out if you want to heal properly. It's kind of how it feels. He's going to make you struggle so you realize you have that bullet still in there. He's not going to help you take away the pain so the bullet can remain in there. Anyway, I think I'm done. That was just a humbling moment, I guess, and an interesting moment of seeing, wow, this can happen to me. Some sense you wish you hadn't experienced it, but in some sense you know God's going to use it in some sense in the future of you being able to relate to people in a deeper way, being able to help them more. Yeah. So always something you just say to yourself like, you better, God, you better use this in some way because I didn't want this for fun. But again, it touches deeper places in yourself where you see your identity is still fractured and shattered. And he is like, nah, that's not your identity. Let me bring everything together and show you who you really are. Because it makes you stronger and it makes you more capable of not falling into the same traps in similar difficult situations. And that's definitely a pattern I've seen. That where once in your life, this was really difficult, you've gone through it, and now you can handle 5 of those things at the same time without feeling drained. He's building us up. Yeah. Never thought I could be heard. But I can. I can.